The line they crossed. You better back away from that fence, sir, or I'm calling the police. That was the first thing I heard as I stepped onto the land that had been in my family for well over a century. No warm greeting, no polite inquiry, just a sharp command from a woman in a bright yellow vest and mirrored sunglasses, barking orders like she was on patrol in enemy territory. I was still holding the keys to the front gate, the deed to the property folded neatly in my jacket pocket with my name printed right at the top, and yet somehow I was the one being told I didn't belong. I blinked, half chuckling, assuming maybe she was confused. But no, she wasn't confused at all. This woman was locked into a fantasy in which my great-grandfather's land was her community playground and I was the uninvited stranger. 10 minutes later, I found myself standing beside my own barn, explaining to two police officers why I was being accused of trespassing, while Shindria Morrison stood nearby, dramatically insisting I had jumped the gate to loot the property. I'd suggest you scan the QR code on my ID, I told the younger officer calmly. It links to the county land registry. He did, and in less than a minute, everything shifted. His brows furrowed, and he turned toward Andrea, holding up her so-called deed. Ma'am, this man is the legal owner of this land, he said. We need to talk about this paperwork you handed me. Andrea's jaw fell open like a cartoon character. I swear she even stumbled back a step, like she'd just been caught trying to rob a bank with a crayon. 3 days earlier, I was sitting at a train station in Stuttgart, finishing my coffee and finalizing my return home. For the last 3 years, I'd worked across Europe on environmental revitalization projects, mainly focused on repurposing post-agricultural land. When the final contract wrapped up, I knew it was time to come back to where I was raised, Caldwell County, Texas, and to the Archer family farm. It had been ours since 1886. After my parents passed, I rented some of the acreage to nearby farmers, but the house, the barn, the orchards, and the surrounding acres were still mine and still sacred. I had every document in order. The deed, a preservation title from the state due to the historical value of the barn, tax filings. Everything was clean, current, and legally unassailable. So when I pulled up to the front entrance, I expected some overgrowth, maybe a few curious raccoons, not an entire farm plastered with laminated signs reading Sycamore Hill HOA Community Garden Members Only. The first red flag was the missing wooden sign that had hung there for generations. The one my great-grandfather carved by hand had been replaced with something printed at a copy shop and zip-tied to the fence. I sat in my truck for a full minute, trying to make sense of it. Maybe one of the tenants struck a deal with the HOA. Maybe the neighborhood had permission for temporary use. But the more I looked, the worse it got. A padlock on the gate I didn't recognize. Decorative solar lights lining the gravel drive. Garden gnomes placed whimsically by the barn. And then I saw her Randriocking the property like she was conducting a security sweep, clipboard in hand. She spotted me and approached with that forced customer service tone that somehow managed to sound both fake and rude. Can I help you, sir? I'm actually the owner, I said, trying to keep it casual. Just getting a look around. Her posture changed instantly. This is private HOA property. You need to leave immediately. Trespassing is a criminal offense. I was stunned. I own this farm, I repeated. She scoffed. We've had plenty of folks try that line. You people see open space and think you could just take it. She pulled out her phone and began recording. This is for evidence, she added smugly, like I was seconds away from stealing the barn with my bare hands. Then she called the police. I stood my ground, arms crossed, waiting. When the officers arrived, one officer, Chadwell, was professional. The other officer, Keys, was clearly familiar with Andrea. She whispered something to him while pointing at me. I handed over my ID and my state-issued title card. Andrea, not missing a beat, handed over a bulging folder. This is our HOA deed, she said. We've annexed this land as part of the Community Garden Initiative. Officer Chadwell scanned the QR code on my card. Within seconds, his entire demeanor changed. Ma'am, he said, turning to her, this registry shows Mr. Archer as the sole legal owner. The documents you provided don't align with county records at all. Andrea's face turned a shade of gray I didn't know skin could achieve. There must be some error, she stammered. We've had this land for over a year. It's always been part of Sycamore Hill. No, ma'am. It hasn't. Officer Chadwell handed her back the file. You need to stop interfering with private property. Officer Keyes shifted awkwardly, like he didn't want to be there anymore. Andrea marched off, muttering something about her attorney. I stayed and walked the land. What I saw shocked me. Raised planter beds. A coral-painted porch I never approved. A hammock strung between the pecan trees. Even a chicken coop with clucking residents. My barn had new lock. Someone had moved in not physically, but administratively. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a full-scale takeover attempt. That night, I reviewed everything I brought back from Europe. I called a property lawyer friend and laid it all out. By morning, we had a plan. But before we acted, I needed undeniable proof. I bought trail cameras and set them up across the property discreetly. If Andrea or anyone else held unauthorized meetings, I'd catch them. And I was done being polite. The next day, I visited the county recorder's office to verify if Andrea had filed anything legitimate. A kind woman behind the desk pulled up the parcel number. There's a community overlay claim here, filed about 9 months ago, she said. But it's incomplete. It lacks the owner's consent. Which will be mine, I confirmed. She printed the file. It was laughable. Andrea had filed under a clause that allowed the HOA to maintain neglected land for public good, but she'd skipped the critical step getting my approval. Worse, the community endorsement section looked like it had been signed at a block party. I scanned everything, paired it with my certified deed, and drafted a cease and desist letter. That afternoon, I returned to the farm. Andrea was leading a group tour-retired couples sipping smoothies while she pointed out kale beds and yoga mats. I walked in, GoPro clipped to my shirt, and handed her the laminated cease and desist. This is fake, she snapped, barely glancing at it. I handed her my certified deed. Crush this one too if you want, but it won't change the truth. She stormed off. I began removing unauthorized signs. I didn't touch the structures, yet me lawyer advised against it, but I documented everything. That night, the retaliation began. My mailbox was stuffed with fake HOA fines. One accused me of unauthorized interference. Another warned of immediate evaporative measures. I assumed she meant eviction, not vaporization. We escalated. I installed motion-triggered cameras in trees, under eaves, and inside the barn's weather vane. 2 nights later, I got a ping. Andrea and 2 board members enter my barn with flashlights and diagrams. They talked about staging a ribbon-cutting ceremony to gain media attention. If we go public first, one of them said he's the trespasser. I sent the footage to Mia Tran, a college friend turned investigative reporter. Within 10 minutes, she called me. This is gold, she said. The next morning, Mia and her crew filmed everything fake signs, altered buildings, and the nighttime footage. I gave an interview under the century-old oak tree. That night, the story aired. Comments poured in. Andrea was called a dictator in yoga pants. Neighbors reached out with apologies. Screenshots of HOA group chats leaked. One read, Andrea lied to us. I feel sick. Then came a surprise visit. A tall man in a 1973 Land Development Association cap introduced himself as Henry Tolman, original developer of Sycamore Hill. He laid out old zoning maps. This farm was never part of the HOA, he said. I kept it out on purpose for historical preservation. He agreed to testify. That afternoon, we added his affidavit to our legal file. The suit now included defamation and attempted land seizure. Andrea wasn't done. She filed an emergency injunction, claiming the farm was in legal limbo and should be placed in public trust. Her filing was a joke. It referred to me as a transient individual of unclear occupation. The judge rolled her eyes and denied the injunction immediately. This man is the legal owner, she said sternly. Further interference will be considered harassment. More board members resigned. Andrea tried to save face with flyers claiming I was building a gas station. I hosted a meet and greet instead. Neighbors arrived, skeptical at first, but once they saw the evidence, their mood shifted. One couple said they'd paid Andrea $600 for garden dues. Another said she banned their son from the swing set. Andrea showed up flanked by 2 board members. She tried to hand me a community violation notice. I didn't take it. Karen, I mean Andrea, I said. You're on someone else's land. Again, in front of witnesses. Don't add another count of harassment. She walked away, silent. Soon after, she tried a final stunt, hiring private security to inspect the property. I called the police. Officer Chadwell arrived again. Andrea handed him the same fake papers. Ma'am, you've been warned, he said. This is criminal trespassing now. She didn't argue, just left. As the sun set behind the barn, I finally felt peace. The chickens would be rehomed, the garden torn down, the gazebo dismantled. Andrea was stripped of her HOA title and under investigation for falsified records. But I wasn't after revenge, I wanted restoration. I started outreach to local schools and nonprofits. A real community garden was planted this time with signed contracts. I turned part of the barn into a small museum. A new sign went up. Archer Family Farm restored and protected. Private property. HOA fines will be laughed at. That fall, the town's seasonal market was hosted on my land. No fees. No gatekeepers. Just people. Andrea, meanwhile, had been evicted caught embezzling HOA funds to cover her legal bills. A photo of her sitting curbside with her things made the front page, from president to defendant. I framed it, put it in the barn. The land was mine again. Not because a court said so, but because I refused to let anyone rewrite its history. And as I sat on my porch, cider in hand, watching kids run between rows of pumpkins, I realized Andrea didn't destroy the farm. She made it stronger.